Hey, today we're going to be talking about ecological succession. So there's two types. There's primary and secondary, and we're going to talk about each one of them. So ecological succession, there are two types of changes that occur in an ecosystem. There could be like a sudden disturbance, like a severe storm, or let's say an earthquake or a tsunami. Um, and then there's a gradual response to that change in the environment and how it comes back to where it once was before. So the definition for succession is a series of predictable changes of an ecosystem after a disturbance. So the types of succession are primary, and primary starts with bare rock. There's no soil, and an example of this would be like a volcano, because once that lava dries, it's just rock. And then the second one is secondary succession, and this has soil. So this is going to recover much quicker. So an example of something like this would be a fire, for instance. Okay, so we're going to start with the first one, which is primary succession. And again, like I said, there's no soil whatsoever. Right? Like in this picture, the volcano hits and it's coming off and it's covering all the soil. So when it dries, it's just solid rock. So then there's what happens is something will come in and start growing. So that is called a pioneer species. So with volcanoes and stuff, what will come in are what is called lichen. And you see it all the time, although you probably don't realize it. Um, but it can grow on rock with no soil. So this is usually the first living thing that comes on um, the solid rock. And then eventually what happens is that pioneer species, the lichen or moss, will die, and it's going to add more organic material to what will start becoming the soil. Okay, so here's primary succession. Um, so we see that that's when it reaches its climax. We're going to talk about. So here it starts with just rock. So I have lichen and moss, and then eventually that will break down and create a soil. Then the first thing you get, of course, is weeds, right? Because they just show up everywhere. And so as it progresses, it will go into bushes and grasses, and then it'll reach back to where it used to be before the volcano, um, which is called a climax community, which we'll get to where it was before the volcano ever started. Okay, so here's an example. Here, let's say a volcano erupted and all we're left with is rocks, right? So rocks come from a volcano eruption. And number two, what happens is the lichen and moss will come on the rock and it'll start breaking it down and leaving those nutrients that it has. So it takes a very, very, very long time to do this. Um, and then once the rock is broken down, because the lichen will get in between the rock and it'll, start breaking apart and stuff. So then we're going to eventually get soil. And the soil is going to have nutrients from the lichen and the moss. So we're going to start seeing some growth coming. So in the next one, we see that we have bushes and there'll also be grasses coming in and stuff like this. And then we will reach where we have it's growing up, right? So it's like a little baby growing up, right? So it'll have more soft trees, wooded trees, and then eventually what we'll get to is we have, animals come back and birds and all that kind of stuff. and it's called a climax community. So, like I said, the pioneer is the first species that comes in to live in the disrupted environment. So for primary succession, it's going to be lichen, and also mosses, but generally speaking, lichen always comes first. For secondary succession, which we're going to go over in a second, it's usually weeds. So for instance, secondary succession is an example would be a fire. So let's say a fire comes and burns everything out, but it burns everything on the top of the soil and the soil's left. So a lot of weeds, with their roots will grow up first. So there you have it. And then at the end of each one of these, once it returns to its original ecosystem, it will then be called a climax community because it's reached, where it had been. Okay, so here's secondary succession, and this one has soil. So this is like a forest fire. It could be a flood, all kinds of things. But it takes so much shorter time, so much to reach that climax community because the soil's already there. It's not like it has to make soil. And also the roots are there from the plants that had been there. So a lot of times those will just revive and stuff. So yeah, primary succession takes forever because you think it has to make soil from rock. That's it. So here's an example here. This just took like, 150 years to come back from that forest fire to where it had been in the beginning. So here's an example of secondary succession. So here's my ecosystem before the fire. Then I have the fire and it's burnt everything up, but I'm left with this soil. So from that soil, I will get weeds coming up and stuff like that. And then eventually I'll get bigger bushes and smaller trees. And you can see how it just, is growing up to be like an adult ecosystem, sort of say. And then at the end, I have my climax community. And you can see where that is the same as from where we started. Okay, so this is ecological succession. First, we have primary, no soil. No soil. If you remember nothing else, remember primary, no soil, secondary, with soil. All right. Hey, have a great day.